everything was accomplished. What I have proposed is to continue that dialogue that we failed on last year. And like I said before, that would be an opportunity to bring in teachers on climate surveys to understand where they feel we're falling short and what we can do better.
Mr. Alper?
Yeah, it was frustrating how long it took, especially after all of those meetings. And, you know, one thing that I heard from friends who are teachers, and that I also heard was happening on the school board side, was that nobody on either side was saying, you know, we're not even going to take that offer seriously. It was a long, slow, painful process. But, you know, one day one of my teacher friends at Gregory said, oh, the mediator couldn't make the meeting last night, so it didn't happen. And I said, oh, so what are they doing, scheduling it tomorrow? This was a good year and a half in at this point. Tomorrow, next week? No, it's going to be in a month. Nobody was in a hurry, and maybe worked better for negotiations on both sides to stretch it out, I don't know. But I don't know if the rank and file was aware of that, and I think that contributed to the gain.
Next question. What do you see as a viable alternative, if any, to measuring via standardized testing such as PARCC? Mr. Alper, you have a minute to respond.
So I think standardized testing does have its place if it's properly designed, not preferably, it has to be designed by educators, it has to be validated, it has to be proven to work. You know, one of the biggest problems with PARCC is that, you know, forgetting whether it's a corporate issue or not, it was rolled out in a hurry. It was a political process because it was designed to, I think, in some part at least, get teachers and make teachers look bad. And when politicians take control of processes like that, it's not good. You know, a properly designed standardized test, you know, we took the Iowas when we were kids, other districts used other things. You know, they weren't every year, they weren't high stakes, people's compensation wasn't tied to them. You know, you can't have a world where you say to teachers, you know, we want you to go and teach in high needs districts and go where the, you know, and go into poor districts and be of service to the world. But, you know, socioeconomic status is directly linked to test scores, and we're only going to pay you as good as your kids' test scores are. So who's going to go teach in those districts? How are you going to encourage people to do these great things? It's, you know, we need some sort of measurement, but it's got to be fair and has to be designed by educators for educational use.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz?
I've been saying this so long that I feel like I hear it in my sleep. The best measure of a child's academic success is their longitudinal success. How has that child done from kindergarten straight up and through 8th grade? Are they getting A's? Are they getting B's? Are they understanding the concepts? Teachers are in the classrooms every day with our students. They understand. They see our children's development. They're able to pinpoint how well our kids are doing. Now, while we have standardized tests, and they are an evil that we are going to have to deal with, tying the results of those standardized tests to student achievement in honors programs, in testing that has not been vetted by the board or not been vetted by parents is absolutely ridiculous. 20% of your longitudinal grade as a child should not count to whether or not you get to be challenged in an honors program.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds, Mr. Alper.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. The best measure is definitely longitudinal success, but we need to figure out what we're going to measure it with. Yeah, I don't know that grades work necessarily from year to year to do it. I think it has to be some sort of external validation. You know, I'm not thrilled with the standardized test that we have either, though, obviously. I do think there's some value to comparing from school to school as well, which you obviously can't do without. You know, MAP actually seems promising from what I'm hearing from the teachers I know. They're actually, you know, fairly okay with it so far. They're taking a wait and see attitude. You know, a lot of the younger grade teachers I know are very happy that it's replaced the benchmarking that they used to have to do that took so much time.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, 30 seconds to rebut.
So when a test that is designed in secret and only measures 20% of your child's longitudinal grades has almost everything to do as to whether or not that child is going to be challenged, then that is something that we need to bring out into the forefront. And one of the things that we should do is we should press the board and we should press the superintendent to develop across the board curriculum standards that absolutely pinpoint what a child has.
Thank you. Next question. What makes you different from the other candidate running for the board, and why is that difference so important? Mr. Diaz, you have a minute to respond.
So, Ken knows, and I think the feeling is mutual, that we have absolute respect for each other. We both value our public schools and our public education. What makes me different? What makes me different is that I've been on the front lines for almost 20 years as an attorney, as a member of this community, standing up at board meetings, challenging the board when they've broken the law, when they have not followed our state statutes, when they've disrespected our teachers, when they have not followed board policy. I have stood on the front lines for children who have had special education advocacy needs, not only in Essex County, but across the state. I am someone who will fight every step of the way, who will never back down and has never been afraid to speak truth to power. Now, I have proven that time and time again as an advocate. I've proven it as a member of the community by investing in our children's empowerment, by bringing Girls on the Run to West Orange, by advocating for special needs in our district, and by being available to anyone who's ever had a question.
Thank you.
So I'm not a lawyer, I'm a market researcher. I work with data and I work with people. I help people find out what they need to know by working with them to craft their questions and get to the answers they need. A lot of that is building consensus. Clients will come to us with a questionnaire and we'll say, you can't ask it this way, it's going to bias it, you're going to get results that aren't meaningful, they're going to be slanted one way or the other, we need to redo that for you. So, I feel like I do the work between the meeting that makes the meeting productive. The contacts you're making and the conversations you're having to build consensus and to cut through the noise and get things done and accomplish real goals. There's certainly a place for standing up when things are being done wrong and when rights are being violated, but sometimes a different approach actually gets better results. And I think that I'm fairly good at that, given my past success getting the parking and bus lane and everything else done at Gregory. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, you have 30 seconds to respond.
So advocacy doesn't always mean being the tough guy. Sometimes it requires you to sit down at the negotiation table and, like I said earlier, fight for the greater good. And that it takes an opportunity to sit back and understand that a combative position is not always the best. A collaborative position is. And that's how I think I've been successful as an attorney as well. I've been able to get people to come around and see how the greater good can be achieved by simply listening to each other. I find that that is what is lacking on this board now, the ability to open your ears and listen.
Thank you. Mr. Alper?
I agree completely about collaboration and listening. It's why I'm here at just about every Board of Education meeting taking copious notes. It's why I'm talking to people to find out their viewpoints and understand what's going on. And it's why I was at each of the strategic planning meetings that helped us create the 5-year strategic plan that is currently being implemented. Definitely very collaborative. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question. How would you describe the effect of the ASAP program for students participating in athletics? Mr. Diaz, you have a minute to respond.
I am a huge supporter of athletics in our district. My daughter is a rising basketball star and a rising softball star. So I have always prided myself on the fact that West Orange and our kids are standouts in the fields of athletics. Athletics complement education in every imaginable way. So my feeling on the ASAP program is that right now it appears to be successful. I've gotten great feedback from other parents and students about how that is working out for them, and I think that it is something that we need to continue to support.
Thank you.
So the ASAP program, if you don't know, if you don't have any kids at the high school, it stands for Athletic Students for Academic Proficiency, and it's been a fantastic success. It was instituted several years ago when we were having some trouble in the district with athletes not keeping their grades up, and under the program, simplifying it, if your grades aren't good enough at certain points in the year, you have to go for mandatory tutoring until you get them back up where they need to be. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like when the program started, I think half of the student athletes were actually at one point in it at the very beginning, and currently at any given time, it's down around 20. So it's really, and a lot of the kids who were in it, I understand, have actually gone on to honor roll. So it's been a tremendous success, and there's also a band version of it, BSAP, I understand, which does the same thing for band kids. So it's one of the things I think West Orange has actually done really well.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
It's hard to rebut against something that's working so well. But what I would like to say is that taking that concept of mandatory tutoring and enhancement of academic achievement and bringing that over to the district in general for kids in our underperforming schools, for kids who are stuck in the middle, for kids who don't have access to the type of resources that some of our neighboring districts have or that some of our more affluent families have, would be something that I would absolutely be supportive of, would be something that I would spearhead. I think it's time that we do that as a district as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Alper, you also have 30 seconds.
Man, it's hard to keep rebutting when we keep agreeing, right? So yeah, the tutoring, the African Heritage organization has been doing that in a lot of our schools, and it's been enormously successful. I'd love to see that expanded in any way we can. That's a fantastic program, and definitely.
Thank you. Next question, which I think all of you in the audience will be interested in. How will you improve parental involvement throughout our district? Mr. Alper, you have a minute to respond.
So, obviously parental involvement is absolutely key to student success, and this would probably have to come about through a contract negotiation, but I would absolutely love to see the ability for parents to have, especially elementary parents, to have conferences in the evening hours, so that if they work hourly and it's a real struggle to take a day off of work to go to a conference, that they can still get there and have that really important meeting with their kid's teacher to let them know that they're active and involved and interested, and to bring them into the process to help that kid succeed. Similarly, maybe through grant money, maybe through volunteers, we really have to make sure we have translators available for parents who maybe don't speak English fluently as well. Because again, these are kids who tend to fall through the cracks because their parents aren't able to give them the same resources and same amount of involvement that other parents who have more flexible work schedules or better English abilities are able to do.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz.
Parental involvement is key. It's key to student success. Now, in districts on the West Coast, they have a novel idea called collaborative education. And what that does and what that allows is it allows parents to form committees that actually act as advisory committees when it comes to making large decisions in a school district. Now, their decisions and their recommendations are not binding, but it gives them an opportunity to be heard. Now, we do that kind of on a case-by-case basis here in West Orange. But to be able to implement a program of collaborative education would be tremendous. It would be a huge help. Also, we need to shore up our communications. And one of the areas where we need to do that is in special education and our out-of-district placement students. I have plenty of friends, plenty of people who I've helped who have out-of-district placements in this district and don't feel like they're part of the West Orange family. We need to shore up the community, get those parents involved, bring them to the table the same as we do for every parent in West Orange.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds, Mr. Alper.
Collaborative education sounds like a great idea. I would wonder, though, I think it might bring parents who are already involved, more heavily involved, and not too much to expand the pool to help the kids whose parents aren't able to be involved yet. I think the single biggest thing that society could do in general to improve education and to increase test scores, whatever test you're using, is to eliminate or reduce poverty. And obviously that's not within the power of the school board to do, but every little thing that a district can do to reduce the effects of poverty through helping parents where they can would be enormously helpful. Like the ESL training that they're doing for parents in Hazelwood, Washington that I forgot to mention.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, you have 30 seconds.
So we may have found an area where Ken and I actually maybe disagree a little bit. The idea of the collaborative education, I saw at the last board meeting when there was a motion to open up a discussion on, just a discussion about climate surveys. And the response from some of the members on the board were, well, we don't get enough people out here that do this anyway. They're really not too interested. And to me, that was showing such a lack of belief in the enthusiasm of our community. I believe
Thank
that
you.
if you put it out there, people will come.
Thank you. The next question, which seems to be a follow-up to this debate, is what is being done about finding an ESL supervisor? Will paras be brought back to ESL, especially in LEP classes? What are your statuses with paras in general?
That first on this one?
Mr. Diaz is first on this one.
What's being done? Right now, we don't know. The board has not, as far as I can tell, put that on its agenda. They have not made it a priority, and it's something that they should. Now, last year, when there was talk, and earlier in this year when there was talk about cutting paras, and we did in a great, in some instances, that's something that I was opposed to. I think that we could have saved jobs for our paras with some of the money that we got back from our windfall from the state. I think that we could, we should focus on the value that having paras in classrooms, especially in some of our underperforming districts or districts where we have, or in our underperforming schools, or in schools where there is a need due to overcrowding, the paras are essential.
Thank you. Mr. Alper?
Definitely, I would agree that we need to have paras wherever we can. As far as the ESL supervisor, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not going to pretend I do know what the answer is, but I'll tell you what I would do and what I will do, which is, and I recommend everyone else do it, is at some point when I'm not sitting here, I'll pull out my phone and I'll send an email to jrutsky@westorangeschools.org and I'll say, what's happening? What's the, where is the ESL supervisor? What's the status on that? What's the latest? And if I don't get an answer, I'll send another email. If I don't get an answer, I'll ask at a board meeting if that's necessary. Or I'll send an email to, there's I think a group address that goes to all the board members. Generally you get good responses when you ask. I don't know what the status of this, it's not something that I'm personally aware of, but what I would say if I were on the board and this question were posed to me, I'm going to find out and get back to you.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I'm just going to respond by reiterating that having paras in our classrooms is essential. It's important, and I would absolutely urge the board to put this on their agenda. I'd urge the superintendent to speak about it, to let us know where we stand with regard to an ESL supervisor, and that is part of the advocacy that I find to be very important and key and crucial to a potential member of the Board of Education.
Thank you.
It's going to be a lousy and quick rebuttal. Yeah, I agree. It should be put on the agenda. I urge them to do it as well.
Thank you. Next question. We spend a lot of time talking about students in honors and students in special education. What would you do for the kids in the middle? Mr. Alper, you have the floor.
That's a great question. While I do have two students who are in special education, they're also both pretty much in the middle, so I feel like I live a lot of this myself. We're already doing some good things, especially at the high school level where there's just so many things for kids to do. It's not just about academics, it's about the whole child. It's about sports for some of them, it's about extracurricular activities. My middle schooler now in 6th grade has got a ton of possible